are you drinking anything?
Well, I'm actually, yes, I'm drinking a bottle of home brew, actually, not brewed by me. It's a bottle conditioned stout brewed by a very good friend of mine on the island called Nigel Smith, and it's excellent, better than most of the commercial products, which is a very rare thing to say about home brew.
Delightful, lovely. Well, for those who don't know, this is Mr. Chris Holmes. He has been involved with the campaign pretty much as long as anyone. I think that's probably fair to say. Chris, you were the 4th national chairman in 1976. And having moved on from CAMRA, well, from the national executive, you went on to found the Time Mill Pub Company in 1977, and of course Castle Rock Brewery in Nottingham in 1999, one of my relatively local breweries. So I'd love to hear your memories about the early days of CAMRA, Chris. You were joined, I think, 1972-ish.
Yeah, I joined in 72, and the one thing I must say, I'm so pleased that Roger Protz is on this panel, because that means that I won't be the oldest person on tonight.
Do you think there's any point in us staying on?
And so what can you tell us? What was it like? We all want to know, what was being a member of CAMRA like? I've been doing loads of interviews recently, and I've been telling everyone there were these 4 young guys. They were passionate, and they were joined by lots of other young men, professional men, who were excited about real ale and passionate and cared about the cause and fiery and fun and a little bit drunk. Is that true, or have I just kind of been wildly romanticizing?
Well, I think that's largely an understatement, really. I think quite a lot of it really can't be printed. It could have been printed then, but probably not now. My recollections, particularly when I was on the NE and when I was chairman, was that it was immense fun and incredibly challenging, because CAMRA was being run on a shoestring, membership was going through the roof, and we had a very, very small staff at St Albans. And I was trying to hold down a job in Nottingham as a lecturer. And I must say that 1 year of it practically finished me off, because I was trying to do my job. I was trying to go to about 3 or 4 regional meetings around the country. There was a monthly meeting of the NE in London, which I would go to, and then often rather than waking up in Nottingham, I'd wake up in Sheffield and have to spend the night in Sheffield Station. And every Friday at lunchtime, I would go to St Albans to talk to Michael Hardman and sign checks, things that now seem stupid, but the administration and the organizational side was a nightmare and incredibly difficult for us. So I'd talk to Michael, do the usual bureaucratic stuff, and then we would go to a pub in Barnet and drink Green King Abbott, and then go to the Flask in Hampstead and drink Young's, and then I would probably then spend Saturday in London and go back to Nottingham. But you made the point that the campaign was started by young people with fire in the belly, and you've got to remember we're just coming out of the 60s, where the culture all over was so different from the sort of world that we live in now. It was the world of protest. And I think an interesting thing about CAMRA is that it was a protest organization. Now, usually protests come from one or the other, one side of the political spectrum. The great thing about CAMRA was that it was non-partisan. It attracted people from the left and it attracted people from the right. And it made a really great mix of different types of people. But again, going back to people, the things happening in the late 60s, where a lot of people knew that something was going wrong with beer. I mean, myself and my mates, when I was at university in Birmingham, we talked about chemic beer and all this. But there was a conjugation, almost a synchronicity with Chris Hutt's wonderful book, The Death of the English Pub, the 4 guys, Hardman, Lees, Makin, Mellor, starting CAMRA. The SPBW had already started, And these people coalesced to start what, let's be honest, in the early days it was for a laugh. No one was really serious about it. And I was fortunate because some very good friends of mine were very good friends of Chris Hutt. And that was how I first got introduced and first signed up in early 72. And that was the time when I went to Nottingham. And I went to the Nottingham CAMRA branch, and it was a complete and utter fiasco. It was it was a total joke. And I have to say that, you know, through those years in the early 70s, the organization, the way in which things were done was chaotic, but it had a huge impact. And I think it was largely through what we would call PR. I mean, we claim that within about 2 years of the start of CAMRA, every newsroom in the country had a CAMRA member.
Yeah,
so
that's Michael Hartland.
So that whenever there was a great story or a story against the big six, against the big battalions, it was very, very easy to get the publicity. We have to mention Richard Boston. And he had a wonderful piece in The Guardian. I think he only probably wrote it for about 1.5 or 2 years. But that, it got to lots of people, and he was so camera friendly. So when we talk about early campaigning, it was PR, and it was brilliantly done. But no one was managing it. It just happened because there was so much latent support amongst the population about what was happening to beer and the ownership of pubs. So these people, Michael Hardman was massively important because his energy and drive was fantastic. Chris Hutt, early chairman of CAMRA, wonderful man on his feet, inspirational speaker, etc. And you could say that it was going to happen anyway, but it did need certain individuals to push it and lead it and take it to where we are now.
Yeah, Michael and Chris both couldn't join us tonight, unfortunately, but they are, of course, thinking of us all today. I think people who we sadly don't have with us anymore as well. Frank Bailey, for example, really important.
Indeed, yes.
But just so many real iconic names in the world of cask beer. And I think as well, just quickly, Chris, CAMRA's impact, I think, is notable in Nottingham. It's a real interesting case in the start of the low ale scheme. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about specifically CAMRA in Nottingham?
Well, to be honest, that would be quite difficult for me, really, because
you were on the other side.
I was chairman of the Nottingham branch, and then I was on the NE, and then chairman of CAMRA. And then in 1977, I had the chance to open a pub in Newark, which meant I know Newark's only 20 odd miles from Nottingham, and I should also point out that when I opened my first pub, I resigned from all my positions in the campaign for real ale. And it actually is one of my great bugbears that people who actually have a vested interest, a personal vested interest in pubs and beer, still have, let's say, powerful positions inside the campaign, which I think is all wrong. I stood right back from it, and I'm just a simple life member, which was one of the best investments I ever made.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
So, obviously the Nottingham branch went on to be arguably one of the best branches in the country. I mean, I think my information is it probably gives more money to Central CAMRA than any other of the branches. It runs a brilliant beer festival.
Incredible.
And it's still run by really great people. Really fantastic operation. Really, really good. And of course, with our brewery being in Nottingham, we get a huge amount of support from local CAMRA, and long may it be so. And let's hope it won't be long before we can start selling stuff back to them.
And Harvest Pale at the last Nottingham CAMRA survey, the most served pint in Nottingham, I believe. Yeah,
it would appear that we're now in the big battalions, aren't we? And there is an element. There are some CAMRA members who I think don't like us very much because we're too big. but I mustn't let my personal things come.
Well, it's a very broad church, is CAMRA, isn't it? Right, let's thank you, Chris.